Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we begin a deep and fascinating journey into one of the most iconic and longest-running coins in United States history, the Jefferson Nickel, a coin that quietly sits in pockets and collections yet carries within it nearly a century of American political history, artistic debate, wartime sacrifice, economic change, and evolving national identity. First introduced in 1938 at a time when America was still recovering from the Great Depression and searching for symbols of stability and democratic continuity, replacing the Buffalo nickel which, although beloved today, was costly to strike and impractical for mass production, prompting the U.S. Mint to seek a more durable and modern design that could withstand heavy circulation while honoring one of the nation's most influential founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, the principal author of the Declaration of Independence, the third President of the United States, and a figure deeply associated with liberty, intellectual curiosity, and the early democratic ideals of America, making his selection both politically symbolic and historically appropriate for a denomination that millions of ordinary citizens used every day, with the obverse portrait created by sculptor Felix Schlag, whose winning design emerged from a national competition held by the Treasury Department, beating hundreds of submissions with a profile of Jefferson that was dignified, classical, and restrained, yet controversial at the time because it depicted Jefferson facing left rather than the traditional right-facing portraits common on earlier U.S. coins, while the reverse featured Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia estate, a structure that symbolized Enlightenment thinking, architecture, and personal legacy, though early critics complained that Schlag's original design lacked clarity and depth, leading the Mint to request modifications that resulted in the flatter, more stylized Monticello image that debuted in circulation, marking the beginning of a coin that would remain in production with the same core theme for more than 8 decades, an extraordinary lifespan in American numismatics, as the Jefferson Nickel entered circulation in October 1938 with an initial composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel, a standard alloy chosen for durability and resistance to wear, weighing 5 grams with a diameter of 21.2 millimeters, specifications that allowed it to function smoothly in vending machines and commerce while maintaining consistency with earlier 5-cent pieces. And as America moved into World War II, the Jefferson nickel would unexpectedly become a symbol of national sacrifice when nickel metal was declared a critical war material, forcing the Mint in 1942 to alter the coin's composition to a unique wartime alloy of 56% copper, 35% silver, and 9% manganese, creating the famous wartime silver nickels that stand out in history not only for their precious metal content but also for the large mint marks placed above Monticello, the first time in U.S. history that a mint mark appeared so prominently on a circulating coin, signaling transparency, accountability, and urgency during a period when every resource mattered to the war effort. And after the war ended in 1945, the Jefferson Nickel quietly returned to its original copper-nickel composition, yet it carried forward the memory of a nation mobilized, evolving through decades of social change, Cold War tension, technological advancement, and shifting artistic tastes, all while remaining visually familiar to generations of Americans, from children receiving their first pocket change to collectors searching rolls for rare dates and mint errors. And throughout the second half of the 20th century, the Jefferson Nickel became a canvas for subtle changes rather than dramatic redesigns, including sharpening and softening of strike quality, variations in Monticello steps that would later define the coveted full steps designation, and slight portrait refinements that reflected improvements in minting technology rather than artistic overhaul, reinforcing the coin's role as a stable and dependable element of daily life. And as the United States entered the 21st century, the Mint finally acknowledged the deep historical resonance of the Jefferson Nickel by launching the Westward Journey series in 2004 and 2005, temporarily replacing Monticello with designs celebrating the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark Expedition, while experimenting with new portraits of Jefferson that broke from tradition, including forward-facing and stylized depictions that sparked debate among collectors and historians, before ultimately returning Monticello to the reverse in 2006 with a refined obverse portrait that continues to circulate today, blending heritage with modern engraving standards. And through all these transformations, the Jefferson Nickel has remained more than just a 5-cent coin, serving as a miniature historical document that reflects America's economic priorities, artistic philosophies, and national values across generations, setting the foundation for understanding not only its design and production history but also the deeper stories of rarity, error, and value that make this humble coin one of the most fascinating subjects in U.S. numismatics. The Jefferson Nickel entered circulation in 1938 at a time when the United States was still reshaping its national identity through coinage, and the decision to replace the long-running Buffalo nickel marked both an artistic and symbolic shift in American numismatics, as the Treasury Department sought a design that would honor one of the nation's founding fathers while also reflecting stability, heritage, and democratic ideals during a period of economic recovery following the Great Depression. And Thomas Jefferson was chosen not only because of his role as the principal author of the Declaration of Independence and the third President of the United States, but also because his architectural legacy and intellectual influence offered rich visual material for a circulating coin intended to reach millions of Americans in everyday transactions. With sculptor Felix Schlag winning the open design competition held by the Mint, although his original reverse design depicting Monticello was modified significantly by Mint officials before final approval, resulting in a coin that balanced classical dignity with modern simplicity, featuring Jefferson's left-facing portrait on the obverse rendered in a refined, medallic style that departed from the rugged realism of the Buffalo nickel, and on the reverse Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia estate, was presented as a symbol of enlightenment, order, and American craftsmanship, reflecting Jefferson's passion for architecture and his belief in reason and education as pillars of the Republic, and from its first year of issue, the Jefferson Nickel became deeply embedded in American daily life, struck at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints with a composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it durability and a distinctive silvery appearance that made it instantly recognizable in commerce, while its smooth fields and clear devices made it ideal for high-speed minting during an era when demand for small change was rapidly increasing, and as the years progressed, the Jefferson Nickel quietly chronicled American history through subtle changes in design details, minting practices, and production volumes influenced by war, economic shifts, and technological advancements, most notably during World War II when nickel was diverted for military use, leading to the famous wartime silver alloy issues that temporarily altered the coin's composition and introduced the large mint mark above Monticello, a change that would later become a key diagnostic feature for collectors. Yet beyond these technical aspects, the Jefferson Nickel also became a cultural artifact, carried in the pockets of workers, soldiers, and families across generations, witnessing the transformation of the United States from a pre-war nation into a global superpower, and despite its modest face value, the coin's longevity, remaining in continuous production for decades, cemented it as one of the most familiar and longest-running designs in U.S. coinage history, with its portrait of Jefferson evolving slightly over time but always maintaining the dignified presence intended by its creator, while Monticello on the reverse stood as a quiet reminder of the ideals of liberty, intellect, and perseverance, and even as newer designs and commemorative programs emerged in later years, the Jefferson Nickel's classic appearance ensured its place as both a functional piece of currency and a foundational cornerstone for collectors, historians, and enthusiasts who recognize that the true value of this coin lies not only in rare dates or mint errors but in its enduring role as a storyteller of American heritage, everyday life, and the subtle artistry embedded in the nation's circulating money. The Jefferson Nickel entered circulation in 1938 at a pivotal moment in American numismatic history, replacing the long-running Buffalo nickel after more than 2 decades of service, and its introduction marked a shift toward a cleaner, more dignified presidential portrait style that reflected both classical influence and modern minting needs, with the obverse designed by sculptor Felix Schlag portraying Thomas Jefferson in a refined left-facing profile that immediately distinguished the coin from its rugged predecessor, emphasizing intellectual leadership, Enlightenment values, and statesmanship rather than frontier symbolism, while the reverse depicted Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia estate, rendered with architectural precision that posed significant technical challenges for the U.S. Mint due to its fine lines, steps, columns, and dome structure, all of which were difficult to strike sharply on mass-produced coinage, especially when using the standard alloy of 75% copper and 25% nickel that had been in use since the mid-19th century and was notoriously hard on dies, leading to early production issues where many coins displayed weak steps, blurred windows, and soft central details that would later become a major focal point for collectors and grading services, as the number of visible steps on Monticello's staircase evolved into one of the most important quality indicators in the entire Jefferson Nickel series, with full-step examples commanding dramatic premiums decades later, particularly from the earliest years when minting pressure and die life were not optimized for such intricate architecture, and as production ramped up at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints, subtle differences began to emerge not only in strike quality but also in luster, planchet preparation, and die polishing techniques, which created a wide range of collectible varieties even among coins struck in the same year, while the outbreak of World War II would soon push the series into one of its most historically significant transformations, as nickel became a critical war material and forced the mint to alter the coin's composition beginning in 1942, resulting in the famous wartime silver nickels, composed of 56% copper, 35% silver, and 9% manganese, easily identified by the large mint mark placed above Monticello, a dramatic first in U.S. coinage history that permanently altered how mint marks were used and displayed, and although these silver alloy nickels were slightly lighter in color and more prone to toning, they carried enormous symbolic weight as circulating reminders of national sacrifice and industrial mobilization, while also creating an entirely separate collecting category that bridges both base metal and precious metal numismatics. And once the war ended and traditional composition returned in 1946, the Jefferson nickel resumed its standard metallic formula but never fully escaped the striking challenges that had plagued it since inception, as die were continued to obscure Monticello's steps and fine lines, especially at the Denver Mint where production speed often took precedence over aesthetic sharpness, whereas San Francisco issues, particularly from the late 1940s and early 1950s, frequently exhibited superior detail and smoother surfaces that today are prized by specialists seeking high-grade examples with minimal marks and strong eye appeal. And throughout the 1950s, despite massive mintages driven by post-war economic expansion and rising commerce, the Jefferson nickel quietly accumulated a complex web of varieties, including repunched mint marks, double dies, over-polished dies that erased key details, and planchet flaws that reflected the intense pressure placed on mint facilities during periods of high demand, making the series far more intricate than it appears at first glance, especially when one considers how small changes in hubbing, die alignment, and striking pressure could drastically affect the final appearance of the coin, all while the portrait of Jefferson itself remained largely unchanged for nearly 7 decades, becoming one of the longest-running presidential designs in U.S. history and embedding itself into everyday American life through billions of transactions, vending machines, parking meters, and pocket change, which in turn created a unique challenge for collectors who must distinguish truly exceptional pieces from the ocean of worn, average examples. And as the decades progressed, particularly into the 1960s and early 1970s, rising inflation, metal costs, and minting shortcuts further degraded strike quality, leading to flat steps, lifeless luster, and mushy lettering that contrast sharply with the sharply struck proofs and early business strikes of the series, reinforcing the idea that condition rarity, rather than date rarity alone, is the defining factor in Jefferson nickel collecting, a reality that continues to shape auction results, registry competition, and long-term market interest today. The Jefferson nickel story deepens when we examine how the coin evolved quietly yet significantly through decades of political change, economic pressure, wartime necessity, and shifting artistic philosophy, because unlike flashier denominations that underwent dramatic redesigns, the nickel adapted in subtle but historically powerful ways, beginning with the realities of mass production at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints where early strikes often revealed weaknesses in Monticello's steps, Jefferson's hair detail, and rim sharpness, issues that would later define collector grading standards and create the famous full steps designation that today separates ordinary circulated examples from elite, high-value survivors, a distinction born not from intentional artistry but from mechanical limitations, die wear, and planchet quality during the mid-20th century when the U.S. Mint prioritized volume over perfection to meet exploding post-depression and post-war commerce, especially as vending machines, public transit, and small retail purchases demanded enormous quantities of 5-cent coins, forcing mint presses to operate at relentless speeds that left little room for refined strikes. And this pressure only intensified during World War II when the Jefferson nickel became a critical piece of strategic metal policy as nickel itself was urgently needed for armor plating and military equipment, leading to one of the most fascinating chapters in U.S. coinage history when, from 1942 to 1945, the mint altered the composition to a wartime alloy of 56% copper, 35% silver, and 9% manganese, a dramatic shift that not only changed the coin's intrinsic value but also its weight, color, magnetic behavior, and long-term toning characteristics, making these wartime nickels instantly recognizable to trained eyes by the oversized mint mark placed prominently above Monticello's dome on the reverse, the first time in American history that a mint mark appeared above the building rather than tucked discreetly near the rim, a design decision driven by the urgent need to allow easy separation of silver-containing coins from standard base metal issues once the war ended, a practical choice that inadvertently created one of the most beloved subseries among collectors, who prize these coins not only for their silver content but for the tangible connection they represent between everyday Americans and the global conflict shaping the modern world, as these nickels pass through the hands of factory workers, soldiers' families, ration offices, and corner stores while battles raged overseas. And when the war ended and the mint reverted to the original copper-nickel alloy in 1946, the Jefferson nickel resumed its quiet role as a workhorse of commerce, yet subtle changes continued beneath the surface as hub refinements, die steel improvements, and evolving engraving techniques gradually sharpened Jefferson's portrait and Monticello's architectural clarity, especially during the late 1940s and early 1950s when post-war optimism fueled increased mintages but also improved quality control compared to wartime output, though even then, weak strikes remained common, particularly at the Denver Mint, whose coins often display flattened steps and softer facial details that challenge modern collectors seeking premium examples. While the San Francisco Mint transitioned away from regular circulation strikes after 1954, marking the end of an era and shifting its focus toward proof coinage that showcased the Jefferson nickel in its most refined form, mirror-like fields contrasting sharply with frosted devices, revealing Felix Schlag's original design intentions far more clearly than any circulation strike could. And as the decades progressed into the 1960s, the Jefferson nickel found itself at the center of another national crisis when coin shortages driven by rising metal prices and public hoarding forced the Mint to suspend proof production temporarily, remove mint marks entirely from circulating coins between 1965 and 1967, and prioritize sheer output over aesthetics once again, resulting in coins that are historically significant for what they represent rather than how they look, tokens of economic anxiety and government intervention that mirror broader societal tensions of the era. And yet, even within these constraints, minor design tweaks, die variety anomalies, and production quirks continued to accumulate, laying the groundwork for the rich field of Jefferson nickel variety collecting that thrives today, from doubled dies and repunched mint marks to overdates and transitional errors that reflect the human and mechanical imperfections inherent in large-scale minting. And as the 1970s and 1980s unfolded, inflation gradually eroded the purchasing power of the 5-cent piece while the Jefferson nickel remained visually unchanged, becoming one of the longest continuously issued designs in American history, a silent witness to cultural shifts, technological revolutions, and economic cycles. And despite repeated discussions about redesigning or eliminating the denomination altogether, the coin endured, its familiar portrait and neoclassical reverse becoming deeply ingrained in American consciousness, setting the stage for future reinterpretations and modern tributes that would eventually revisit Jefferson's legacy while honoring the enduring foundation established by this deceptively simple yet historically rich coin. The Jefferson Nickel's story deepens when we explore how this seemingly ordinary 5-cent coin became one of the longest-running and most historically layered designs in American numismatics, reflecting not only artistic evolution but also the economic pressures, political symbolism, and cultural identity of the United States across generations. Beginning with its role during periods of national hardship such as World War II, when the coin's composition was temporarily altered to conserve strategic metals, replacing nickel with an alloy of silver, manganese, and copper, creating the famous wartime silver nickels minted from 1942 to 1945 that today are instantly recognizable by the large mint mark placed above Monticello on the reverse, a design decision never used before or since for circulating U.S. coinage, symbolizing how deeply even small coins were affected by global conflict. And these wartime nickels not only carried intrinsic silver value but also told a powerful story of sacrifice and unity, as Americans willingly accepted changes in everyday currency for the sake of the war effort. And beyond composition changes, the Jefferson nickel also witnessed subtle design refinements over the decades, including variations in Monticello's steps, which later became one of the most important quality indicators for collectors, as full, uninterrupted steps on the reverse signify exceptional strike quality, especially difficult to achieve during certain minting periods, when dies were worn or production demands were high, making full steps Jefferson nickels some of the most desirable modern U.S. coins, particularly from the 1950s and early 1960s. While earlier dates like the 1938D and 1939D remain famous key issues due to low mintages and weak strikes, and as the coin progressed into the late 20th century, it became a quiet witness to America's transition through post-war prosperity, inflationary pressures, and modernization of the U.S. Mint, with changes in hubbing techniques, die preparation, and quality control gradually improving overall consistency but also creating new varieties and errors that today fuel collector passion, such as double dies, repunched mint marks, overdates, and dramatic off-center strikes, each representing a moment where the human and mechanical processes of minting intersected imperfectly, creating coins that are now prized for their uniqueness. And the Jefferson Nickel's design itself remained remarkably stable for over 6 decades, making it a symbol of continuity in American coinage, until the early 2000s when the Westward Journey Nickel series temporarily reimagined the reverse and obverse to commemorate the Lewis and Clark expedition, introducing new artistic interpretations of Jefferson and frontier imagery that sparked renewed interest in the series, bringing younger collectors into the hobby while still honoring the coin's deep historical roots. And throughout all these changes, the Jefferson Nickel maintained its role as a workhorse of everyday commerce, passing through millions of hands while quietly accumulating stories, where patterns, and personal histories, from pocket change during the Great Depression to vending machines, jukeboxes, and modern transactions, embodying the idea that even the smallest denomination can carry immense historical weight, cultural meaning, and collectible potential, especially when viewed through the lens of time, rarity, condition, and context. Making the Jefferson nickel not just a coin, but a tangible timeline of American life, resilience, and evolution. The Jefferson nickel reaches its most exciting and valuable territory when collectors dive deep into its rare dates, transitional compositions, minting errors, and condition-based treasures, because while millions of Jefferson nickels were struck across decades, only a tiny fraction commands serious premiums today, beginning with the legendary 1938 D. Jefferson nickel, the first Denver issue of the series and a key date due to its low mintage of just over 5 million coins, making high-grade examples especially elusive, followed closely by the 1939 D and the even rarer 1939 S, both sought after because of weaker strikes and limited survival in mint state, with fully struck Monticello steps becoming the defining factor for top-tier values, a concept known as full steps designation, which dramatically increases prices when 5 or 6 uninterrupted steps are visible on Monticello, pushing certain coins from modest values into 4 and even 5-figure territory, particularly 4. Early dates like the 1940 D, 1941 D, and 1942 D where sharp strikes were inconsistent. Then comes the historic wartime silver composition from 1942 to 1945, identifiable by the large mint mark above Monticello, containing 35% silver due to nickel shortages during World War II, with issues like the 1943 P, 1943 D, and 1945 P commanding strong premiums in high grades and full steps, while error coins from this period, such as double dies, off-metal strikes, and clipped planchets, are intensely collected due to their historical backdrop, but perhaps the most famous Jefferson nickel error of all is the 1943 P3 halves over date, a dramatic and easily visible variety that can sell for thousands depending on condition, followed by the 1950 D Jefferson nickel, often called the king of circulation strikes, with a mintage of just 2.6 million, making it the lowest mintage regular issue Jefferson nickel and a cornerstone of any serious collection, especially desirable in uncirculated condition, where values rise sharply, while the 1954 S is another sleeper key date due to poor striking quality and low survival rates in high grade, with full steps examples commanding staggering premiums. Then the series enters the era of modern varieties where collectors chase famous double dies such as the 1964 D double die reverse, the 1965 double die obverse, and the bold 1971 S double die obverse proof, which showcases dramatic doubling on Jefferson's I and lettering and remains one of the most visually impressive proof errors in U.S. coinage, while contemporary mint errors like missing mint marks, rotated dies, broad strikes, and wrong planchet strikes continue to fuel demand among error specialists, and condition rarity dominates the later dates, as even common dates from the 1960s through the 1990s can sell for thousands if certified with full steps at the highest grades, with registry set competition driving prices ever higher, culminating in modern proof and satin finish issues that reward sharp detail and flawless surfaces. And when all these factors converge, low mintage, historical significance, striking quality, error rarity, and pristine condition, the Jefferson nickel transforms from everyday pocket change into a powerful numismatic artifact, proving that this long-running series offers endless depth for collectors willing to look beyond face value and explore the remarkable stories hidden within each coin. Thanks for watching.